Ungrateful woman kicked out her black adoptive father, but he was hiding $5 million. Get out of here now, you're not my real father, you were just a favor my parents. The night was cool, but Marcus Williams could feel the heat rising in his chest. He stood in the grand living room of a mansion he had helped to build, a home he had lovingly constructed for his adoptive daughter, Jessica. And yet, here he was, standing at the threshold with only a suitcase in his hand, being asked to leave. You're not my real father. You were just a favor my parents did out of pity. Jessica's words were sharp, slicing through the air like a blade. They echoed in Marcus' ears, louder than any other sound. The world he had spent 23 years building was crumbling before him. A sudden wave of dizziness washed over him as he tried to collect his thoughts, but his heart was too heavy to focus. For years, Marcus had been the one who held Jessica when she cried herself to sleep, the one who paid for her education and helped her become the lawyer she was today. He had worked tirelessly, sacrificing his time and health, always ensuring she had everything she needed. But now, in her eyes, he was just a burden, a man she could no longer bear to have around. The room seemed to close in on him as Jessica stood in front of him, her face twisted with anger. Her well-coiffed blonde hair swayed with each sharp movement, her voice an icy remnant of the young girl he had once cared for. I don't need you anymore, Marcus. You were good enough to raise me, but now you're just in the way. Get out. Marcus' eyes flickered briefly to the framed photos on the shelf. There used to be dozens of them. Pictures of family trips, Christmas mornings, moments of laughter and love. Now only a few remained, hidden behind trophies and awards that Jessica had accumulated in the last few years. Everything that once symbolized their shared life was now overshadowed by her new world. Jessica, Marcus started, his voice quiet and calm, but his throat tightened as he spoke. I raised you. I gave up everything for you. I love you like my own daughter. Stop it, she interrupted sharply. I don't need your pity. Just leave, okay? Take your stuff and go. And don't ever contact me again. With that final command, Jessica turned her back on him, dismissing him like a stranger. Marcus stood still for a moment, gazing at the woman who had once been his little girl. His heart shattered, but he didn't let it show. He slowly turned around and walked out the door. As he stepped into the cool night, the weight of the world seemed to settle on his shoulders. The sound of the door closing behind him reverberated in his ears, and for a moment, he couldn't move. He had been cast aside by the one person he had sacrificed everything for. But deep down, Marcus knew that this wasn't the end of his story. This was only the beginning. As Marcus walked down the driveway, the harshness of the reality began to settle in. The mansion behind him, the house he had worked so hard to create, felt distant, like a world he no longer belonged to. He could still hear Jessica's voice ringing in his ears, her words cutting deeper than any physical blow. You were just a favor. The phrase haunted him, gnawing at his insides. The pain wasn't just in the words. It was in the complete and utter dismissal of his role in her life. He had given her everything. He had given up his own dreams, his freedom, his time, everything for her. But it wasn't enough. To Jessica, he had become a relic of her past, a weight holding her back from the life she was now living. And with Bradley by her side, it seemed like nothing from her past mattered anymore. The relationship they had was over, and Marcus was nothing more than a forgotten chapter. His thoughts were interrupted by a buzz from his phone. It was Robert. Marcus had known Robert for years. They had met during Marcus' early days, when he was working late nights cleaning offices to make extra money for Jessica's books. Robert knew about Jessica's upbringing and the sacrifices Marcus had made. He had been a friend, someone Marcus could rely on. Marcus, I heard what happened with Jessica. Robert's voice crackled through the phone. I'm sorry, man. She doesn't know what she's doing. Marcus' grip on the phone tightened as a sense of anger and confusion swirled inside him. Yeah, well, it's done now. She doesn't need me anymore. She has Bradley, and that's all that matters to her. That's not true, Marcus, Robert replied, his tone firm. I've been hearing things about Bradley. Word is, he's been asking about your wealth. He doesn't think you have anything, but I think you might want to look into that. You know how these people think." Marcus felt a sudden chill run through him. Wealth. Robert's words hit him like a thunderclap. For years, Marcus had kept his financial situation hidden. He had made careful investments in stocks, land, and tech companies, small incremental steps that no one had noticed. Jessica had no idea. Bradley certainly didn't. Marcus had never flaunted his success, keeping it all to himself. But now, with Robert's warning, Marcus realized that his secret was about to come to light, and it would change everything. "I've never told her about my investments," Marcus said quietly, the realization dawning on him. "I never wanted her to see me for my money. I wanted her to love me for who I am, not for what I have." "I know, Marcus, but the thing is, they think you're broke. Bradley thinks he's marrying into money, but he has no idea what you've been hiding. He's probably going to take advantage of Jessica." Marcus ran his hand through his hair, the weight of Robert's words sinking in. His daughter had chosen Bradley over him. But now it wasn't just about love. It was about something else entirely: money, inheritance, and power. It was a game Jessica didn't even realize she was part of. And now Marcus was being dragged into it, whether he liked it or not. "Thanks for the heads up, Robert," Marcus said, his voice growing steady. "But it's time they all learned exactly who I am. I've been too quiet for too long. It's time for them to see the real Marcus Williams." The following week, Marcus was a man on a mission. He had always lived in the shadows, working quietly and building his investments without seeking attention. But now he had no choice. It was time to show Jessica, Bradley, and everyone in their world who he really was. The foundation he had built wasn't just for show. It was his life's work, and it was time for him to take control. That night, a charity gala was being held at the Beverly Hills Country Club, a venue known for attracting the elite of Los Angeles. It was the perfect place for Marcus to make his mark, to reveal himself to the world, and to show Jessica that he wasn't the broken man she thought he was. He had been invited to the event under the guise of a small-time donor. But Marcus wasn't going to show up quietly. He wasn't going to be the man in the background anymore. As he entered the grand hall of the country club, Marcus' heart raced with anticipation. The glittering chandeliers and polished marble floors reflected the wealth and opulence of the guests in attendance. He could spot Jessica from across the room, laughing with Bradley and a group of high-profile lawyers. She was wearing a designer gown, looking every bit the part of the successful professional. She didn't even look in his direction when he entered, too engrossed in her new life to notice the man who had given everything for her. But that would change tonight. Tonight, Marcus was going to take back what was rightfully his. The evening began with speeches and introductions. Guests mingled with each other, exchanging business cards and pleasantries. But as the host took the microphone to announce the special guest of the evening, the atmosphere shifted. "We are honored to have Mr. Marcus Williams with us tonight," the host announced. "A philanthropist and businessman whose work has quietly shaped this community. Please join me in welcoming him." The room fell into silence as Marcus stepped forward, his every movement deliberate. For a moment, the crowd didn't know what to make of him. This man, who appeared to be just another guest, wasn't just any guest. He was a silent giant in the business world, someone who had been hiding in plain sight. As Marcus took the microphone, he looked directly at Jessica, her face now frozen in disbelief. Bradley stood beside her, his smile fading as the reality of the situation began to sink in. "I've spent years in the shadows, working hard to build something that would last," Marcus began, his voice steady. "But tonight, I'm stepping out of those shadows to make sure you all know who I really am." He paused for effect, letting the words sink in. Jessica's eyes widened in confusion, her jaw tightening. She couldn't comprehend what was happening. "I've spent years building my wealth. Not for show, but for a purpose," Marcus continued. "I have a foundation, investments in real estate, stocks, and tech companies. I've never made it public because I didn't want to be defined by my money. But tonight, that changes." The room fell into an awkward silence, and Marcus could feel all eyes on him. His gaze briefly met Jessica's, but she quickly looked away. She was embarrassed. She had no idea. I'm donating $5 million tonight, not to secure my legacy, but to help others who need it more. This scholarship fund will support underprivileged youth, just like I once was," Marcus finished, his voice unwavering. The room was electric with disbelief. The murmurs grew louder as the guests around Marcus started to piece together the story. Some were intrigued, others were shocked, and a few were completely caught off guard. The life they thought Marcus led was completely different from the reality that had just been revealed. Jessica stood frozen. Her eyes darted between Marcus and Bradley. Her lips parted in disbelief. Bradley's confident smile had completely disappeared, replaced by a thin line of confusion. Marcus could see the doubt creeping into his face as he realized the full scope of what was happening. Jessica slowly turned toward Bradley, her voice faltering as she whispered, How could you hide this from me?" The words fell from her lips like stones, each one heavier than the last. Marcus took a slow step forward, his posture tall and commanding as the room quieted. The shift in power was palpable. For the first time, Jessica had been put in a position where her carefully constructed world was beginning to unravel. "Jessica, for years I've worked hard to keep you safe, to give you everything," Marcus said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of years of sacrifice. "But you never once asked how I got here, did you? You never wanted to know about the sacrifices, the pain, the long nights, or the years I spent keeping us afloat." His words cut through the air, sharp and heavy. The silence in the room deepened, with everyone watching the interaction between the two. Jessica's eyes filled with tears, but the anger inside her still burned. "I didn't need you to hide things from me. I didn't need you to keep secrets. You always tried to make me think you were struggling, just so I could feel sorry for you." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. This was the moment he had been dreading. The truth wasn't just about money. It was about the emotional betrayal that had occurred over the years. His love, his sacrifice, his work had been overshadowed by the illusion of his invisibility. Now, she was seeing him not as the man who raised her, but as a figure in a world she had outgrown. "I didn't hide the truth, Jessica," Marcus replied, his voice quieter now but still resolute. "I wanted you to see the person I am, not the money I made or the status I could have. You never asked, so I never told you." Bradley's expression shifted from confusion to realization. He stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "You've been living a lie. You let us believe you were nothing but a charity case. How could you keep this from us? Why didn't you say anything? If you wanted to help people, why hide behind the shadows?" Marcus turned to face him, eyes narrowing. "Because, Bradley, unlike you, I don't need to flaunt my wealth to prove my worth. I don't need the world to know what I've done. I do it because it's the right thing, not for praise, not for recognition, and certainly not for people like you who see others as stepping stones." The silence that followed was thick, and then a new voice rose from the crowd. "You've got guts, Marcus," an older man with a silver beard said. He had been listening from the back of the room, his gaze fixed on Marcus. "Most men would cower when their children turned on them. But you're standing here, revealing your truth. That's something else." Jessica's breath hitched in her throat as she absorbed the words. She was cornered now, not just by Marcus, but by the truth. The revelation of Marcus' wealth wasn't what had shaken her. It was the realization that she had misunderstood the very foundation of her relationship with him. The evening continued, but the air in the room was different. The revelation had caused a ripple effect that no one could ignore. Marcus had taken the step he needed, showing Jessica, and everyone around them, that his worth had never been tied to the money he'd accumulated. But as the night wore on, the weight of the situation began to settle in, especially for Jessica. She couldn't leave the event immediately. The realization that she had pushed the one person who had always been there for her, who had made so many sacrifices, had hit her hard. As the guests continued to mingle, Jessica slipped away from Bradley and made her way towards Marcus, who was standing by the bar, his gaze fixed on the floor. His hands were folded in front of him as if he were weighing the world. "I owe you an apology," she said softly, her voice fragile. Marcus didn't respond immediately, but his eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the hardness that had been in his gaze softened. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued, her eyes tearing up. "But I was wrong. I was so blinded by my own ambition and need to fit in that I couldn't see what was in front of me. I pushed you away because I was ashamed of the man who raised me. But now I see who you really are." Marcus stared at her for a long time before speaking. "It's not about forgiveness, Jessica. You have to understand. This isn't just about what I've done for you. This is about me finally standing up for myself. I did everything for you because I love you, but you don't get to keep treating me like I'm invisible just because I don't live the way you want me to." Jessica nodded, swallowing hard. "I know, and I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I can at least try to make things right." They stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of years of tension and unspoken words between them. It was clear that their relationship had shifted irreversibly, but there was still something to be salvaged, even if it was a small piece of their old connection. "I don't know where we go from here, Marcus," Jessica said softly, the tears in her eyes a silent plea for understanding. "We start by being honest with each other," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "And if you ever want to find your way back, you'll have to start by accepting who I am, flaws and all." Jessica nodded, though the path ahead was unclear. But one thing was certain, her perception of Marcus had changed forever. She had been forced to confront the reality of who he truly was and, in the process, confront herself. The next few weeks were a blur for Marcus. The media had caught wind of the gala's events, and his story was now being shared across the internet. The once hidden figure was now in the spotlight, with people praising his humility, his generosity, and his sudden rise to prominence. But even as he gained recognition, Marcus kept his distance from the media. He didn't want to be known for his wealth, his investments, or the money he'd accumulated. He wanted to be known for the people he helped and the life he had built, not the one that others saw on the surface. As Marcus sat in his office one evening, reviewing financial statements for his newly established foundation, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I'm starting to realize the magnitude of what you've done for me. I never thanked you properly. I want to make things right, but I need time. Please, don't shut me out." For a long moment, Marcus simply stared at the text. He thought about how much time he had spent being invisible to his own daughter. How much time he had spent hiding his worth from the world. The phone buzzed again. "I'll be here when you're ready." Marcus sat back in his chair, the weight of the text sitting heavily in his chest. He had already made the decision. His journey was no longer about what Jessica could give him. It was about how he could give back to the world, in his own way without needing anyone's approval. He slowly typed out a response. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As he pressed send, a small, peaceful smile crossed his face. He had finally found his peace, not in riches, but in the freedom to be himself. And that, Marcus realized, was worth more than any fortune he had ever built.